All right, welcome to this week's edition of Eating Stuff with Holt and Norm.
Take two.
Yeah, so my phone stopped recording for some reason, so when you see us disappear throughout the video, we're double checking to make sure we're still recording. So you guys voted, you chose beef.
All 5 of you, good job, appreciate it.
So that's what we're gonna talk about today. We did a little survey, and we'll talk to you more about that, and we'll give you the results of the survey at the end, okay?
All right, so we have 4 different types of beef that we brought with us today. The first one, well, let's start differently. So the first one we have is a Wagyu beef. We'll talk more about what that specifically is later. It's more of a high-fat beef. The second one we have is actually an organic grass-fed beef. It's a leaner cut, a leaner beef. These two were both combined together. You can get them separately. And then the last 2 that we have are both what we would consider to be conventional beefs. One was a high-fat, one was a low-fat beef. All right, so we'll talk more about those a little bit later.
Okay. All right, just make sure the numbers are increasing. All right, so the first one is conventional. So this is referred to as grain-fed, grain-finished cattle. Grain-finished and grain-fed are kind of the same thing. So like grass-finished, they spend the majority of their lives eating grass and forage in pastures. When the beef is grain-finished, cattle are free to eat a balanced diet of grain, local fed ingredients like potato hulls or sugar beets, and hay or forage at the feed yard. Similarly, grain-finished cattle may or may not have been given FDA-approved antibiotics to treat or prevent or control disease and or growth-promoting hormones. So this is the one that you're going to find in the store most of the time. This is the one that you're going to be fed most of the time, even at like a restaurant. Just because it says grain finished does not mean that they've had grain their entire lives. Because of that ruminant digestive system that we've talked so much about in class, the cattle would never be able to survive on just grain alone, okay, from the time that they were born to the time that they're slaughtered. So it's grain finished. That grain finished gives them an extra bit of carbohydrates, which eventually turns into fat once you eat enough. I know this for sure, okay? And what happens is they're finished on grain, so they get extra fat because we know that fat is flavor.
Say it again, Norm.
Fat is flavor. Fat is flavor. So that's conventional. That's what we're going to see most of the time.
All right.
Mr. Holt.
So next up we have our grass-fed, also known as grass-finished. So these animals are going to, as opposed to the last ones, which are finished off of grain, these ones are going to be left in pastures or have access to their forage, hay, stuff like that, right up until they're butchered. Again, these ones, they could have antibiotics, they might not. They could have growth hormones, they might not. There's no actual well, there is regulation on it, but there's no regulation.
Just a quick note. Just because antibiotics and those things are given the growth hormones,
it is not in the meat.
It is not in your meat. The FDA and the FDA and all those organizations dictate that they have to be out of the system by the time it reaches a consumer.
Right.
So there's a withdrawal time after they're given something like that.
Every medicine that they get has a withdrawal period that they cannot be butchered within so many days of receiving the medication.
There is no antibiotics or stuff like that in your food.
Correct. You're up anyway. So
I am. Okay.
We're still good. We're still recording.
Good.
Yay! All right. So next, you guys know this, but this is my favorite one. I hate organic. It drives me crazy. People are spending extra money on stuff that they don't really need. But that's my opinion. You know what they say about opinions. So, certified organic beef is designated by the official label. It comes from cattle that have never received any antibiotics or growth-promoting hormones. This, to me, is not a great thing because, let's face it, when you get sick, when your animal gets sick, you should be able to give them antibiotics to help them get better so that they can continue to grow and continue to prosper, okay? So that's not a good thing in my opinion. I don't agree with that. These cattle may spend time at the feed yard and can be either grass finished or grain finished as long as the USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service certifies the feed as 100% organically grown. So we can either go with a conventional finish, which is grain fed, or a grass finished. Either one, they can still be labeled organic as long as the feed is labeled organic. And there's some other stipulations in there too. Certified organic does mean that it has been inspected and it has been certified by the USDA. If you just see a label that says organic, not necessarily certified, you might not 100% know what you're going to get. and especially with things that come from overseas. The United States has a very strict policy on what can be labeled as organic and what is not organic. And if it comes from overseas, the USDA can't control their labeling over there. So you do need to be careful, and it's kind of a buyer be warned type situation there. So, okay, Mr. Holt.
Alrighty, so the next one is Wagyu. Wagyu literally stands for Japanese cattle. Okay, so this comes from, obviously we said Japan. This is a very, very fatty beef overall. A lot of people really like the Wagyu, but what that comes from is they hear about this Kobe beef. Okay, so the Kobe beef comes from a very specific region, very specific cattle in Japan. These cattle, they have extremely high fat content. They get fed sake, they get massages every day. They live better lives than most people until they get butchered.
There's always that catch.
Yeah, there's always that catch. If you see Wagyu, don't automatically assume that it's going to be Kobe. It could just be a fatty beef. Kind of like if you see the word Angus. I know McDonald's is famous for this. Their Angus burger, it's not real Angus beef. It's just a very fatty beef.
It's like a crossbred. It's partial Angus,
Right.
but it more refers to how fat the beef is.
Right. All right.
Okay, good.
Yep.
All right, so what you are going to see when you buy conventional beef at the store, when you buy any sort of ground meat, is you are going to see some numbers. 90-10, 80-20, 75-25. We bought 93-7, and we bought 73-27 is what we bought. So what these numbers mean is the numbers indicate the amount of fat versus lean meat that's in that product. So if you see a 90-10, that means that there's 90% lean meat and 10% fat content. So when it comes to fat is what?
Flavor!
Fat is flavor. How about that? So that tells you how much fat is in it, and generally what the producers will do is they'll grind different amounts of fat in it to get these different contents. Okay? Cool. Ready, Holt?
All right, results.
All right, I'm going to stay up here for the results, and hopefully the
Camera doesn't die this time.
Hopefully it doesn't stop recording.
Coming in fourth place out of 4, the participation trophy goes to.
No participation trophy.
Okay.
No.
Goes to the
Suck it,
organic grass-fed beef. We did not have a single person choose the organic grass-fed.
So out of 15 participants, 0 chose the organic grass.
Correct. Coming in third place is burger number 2, which was
The lean ground.
the lean ground.
Personally,
yes.
it's my favorite, but that's kind of what I grew up on.
Right.
But the lean ground is basically what we expected. We expected the lean ground to come in last, and actually the certified organic too was also very lean ground.
Yes.
So we had 2 fat and 2 lean. We figured that was probably the best way to do it. But that's what we expected because that is flavor.
Coming in second place is burger number 3, which for us, it had 5 votes, which was the conventional fatty beef.
Correct.
It was the 73-28, 27.
Yeah, 73-27.
Very fatty beef.
Yes.
That being said, it only won by 1 vote. Coming in with 6 votes, being first place was the Wagyu beef. Again, a very, very fatty beef.
Yes. So basically, what can we extrapolate from this data? We can look at this data and say, okay, does certified organic mean anything? Does Wagyu really mean anything? What is the main difference between these beefs? It's the fat.
It's all the fat.
Yep. Because out of the 15 people, 11 of them chose the high fat content, and only 4 chose
The lower
the
fat,
lower.
which
And
really
let's-
wasn't even that low.
And let's be honest, one of those results was my daughter, so she might have just been like,
Mhm.
I like 2, and
Yeah.
So, but I mean, we included her in the data too, and I mean that's partially my fault because that's what I like, that's what I buy,
that's
so that's what
alright.
she grew up with. So, like I said,
And the other 3 are
yeah.
principles.
Well, yeah, and the one kind of made a lot of sense, like you were saying, Mr. Dippled.
Yeah.
He chose the lean ground, but from
Makes sense.
his days of like bodybuilding, he's very used to those very lean proteins. So
Mhm.
that's kind of probably what his taste is driven towards.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense. with
Mr.
taste
Muhammad
wise.
also chose number 2.
Yep.
And I forget who the third one was.
I forget too. It was somebody else in the business office.
Yeah.
Oh, Rick Clark.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was Rick. Yep. So anyway, all right.
All right.
Thank you guys
Have a
very
good
much.
one, guys. Have a great summer since this will be our last video.
This will be the last summer. Thank you guys.